Okay, good morning. So we are doing today Yadalat Amud Beis, and we are starting out on the last line of Yadalat Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says, "Be Shnei Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya." During the years of Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, I'm not sure which Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was. There was two Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyas. There was Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, a grandson of Rabbi, and I think then there was another one a few generations later. So they were both from the times of the Amoraim. So they are known as Nesiya to distinguish themselves from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? They're not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they are either a grandson or great great grandson. So the Gemara says, B'shani de Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. During the years of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, have a tzaira. There was a tsar. We don't exactly know what it was, but there was problems. Whatever the problems were, we turn the page now to Yadal and Beis. So what did Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya do? Gazar tlas esrei ta'aniyos v'lo yani. So he was Gezer 13 ta'aniyos, and it didn't work. It didn't work for whatever reason. The prayers were not able to be rachmei shamayim. It didn't work. So Staval and Migzar Tzvei. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya was thinking maybe he should do more ta'aniyos. In other words, it wasn't enough to get things going in heaven. So maybe we should order some more fasts. Omar le Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Ami said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, Hare Amru, Ein matrichen es hatzibur yosem midai. Rabbi Ami said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, no, I don't think you should do this because we are not supposed to matriach hatzibur more than what is absolutely necessary. And over here, they've already had 13 fasts. Whatever reasons, it wasn't successful in terms of changing the Gzera, but we shouldn't do more. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rav Abba, Berei de Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, said, Rabbi Ami de Avad legarmei hu de Avad. Rabbi Ami was doing this on his own. De Avad legarmei hu de Avad. He was doing this on his own, meaning that he doesn't really have a source for this. That meaning Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya is really able to make more than 13 fasts. Look at Rashi. Rashi tells us legarmei le'atzmai darash sheloi omar ela lafishahu loy hayarata liz anes. He didn't want to fast. He had already fasted 13 fasts. He wasn't in the mood of fasting anymore. So he said, no, we're done with 13 fasts. 13 fasts is sufficient. So in other words, what is the language of the Gemara? The language of the Gemara seems to be, if you take it a simple level, that Rabbi Ami is literally being accused by Rabbi Abba of saying that he told Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, no, you can't be Matriach Tzibur more than 13 fasts because of the fact that he personally did not want to fast. So before we continue the Gemara, just to mention, Rashi and Taisus both say that this tsar, that whatever happened at that time, was in fact nothing to do with the rain. Both Rashi says l'shar pranis, top Rashi l'shar pranis of v'lo gisham. It wasn't because of rain; it was the other pranis. And Taisus says the same thing in the top line. Taisus as well says ashar mine pranis, top Taisus midemaisi Allah to gam Rabbi Yechon. So that you see clearly both Rashi and Taisus agree that here the Tsar, the 13 fasts, had nothing to do with rain. Maybe it was the government issues and other types of things that were going on. So at this stage of the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya arranges 13 fasts. 13 fasts for the people of the town that they're having a big Tsar. Fine? So yeah, Zolzayim 13 fasts. You have the 13 fasts, it doesn't work. And now the Gemara is up to a situation where Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya is being advised by Rabbi Ami not to make any more fasts. Why? Because you're not matriach l'tzibur yosem midai. Says Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, that Rabbi Ami is conflicted. You know what we call a conflict of interest. He didn't want to fast, and because he didn't want to fast, that's why he told Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya that you not to me matriach l'tzibur yosem midai. That's the Gemara until now. So it says the Gemara. So Zak the Gemara, Elahachi Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rather, this is what Rabbi Chia bar Abba said the name Rabbi Yechanan. Lo shanu el legishamim. When do we learn this concept? of not fasting more than 13 fasts, that's by the rain, right? If you remember what did we learn in the Mishnah told us back on Yud Beis. The Mishnah told us on Yud Beis that once we do the 13 fasts, right? Once the 13 fasts have passed, and then Hayechidim Chayzrin Misaran Ad Sheyetze Nisan. The Yechidim are able to continue on fasting, individuals, but not the community. Once the 13 fasts are up, we're done. Then there's no more fasting thereafter. Says the Gemara, there B'chia Barabba is saying, Elohachi Amar B'chia Barabba, Amar B'yechon Lo Yishanu Elo Legishamim. When do we have the 13 fasts? That's when it's coming to the rain. Avalashar Mine Peranios. But for other types of tsaras, not the rain, other tsaras. Misanen v'holchen ad sheyanu min hashamayim. But for other tsaras, you can go and continue on fasting until you get answered from heaven. That is to say, there's no limit. So long as you feel like there's a benefit to the fasting, then keep on fasting. And I'm helping you around that this is in fact correct, that you can fast more than 13 times by tsaras that are not associated with the rain. When do we talk about the 3 fasts and the 7 fasts? The first, the second, all the different series. That's only by the rain. But when it comes to other types of tsaras, you keep on fasting until you get an answer from heaven. So the Gemara says, "Lema tahavet yufta de Rabbi Ami." Let's say that this is a mamash, a very pretty strong upshlag of Rabbi Ami, right? Because here you see a clear brisa that makes a distinction between the fasting of the rain, which you could do 13 times, and after that, like the Mishnah said, you only have the Yechidim doing additional fasts, versus over here, where we're saying that for other perennials, you keep on fasting until you get an answer. Keep on banging down the doors of heaven. That's a song, knocking on heaven's door or something like that. Yeah, I think so. Some things you remember. Okay, so continues the Gemara. Yeah, the Gemara says this should be an upshlag of Rabbi Ami. Amar Rabbi Ami. So what is Rabbi Ami going to answer you? What is Rabbi Ami going to respond? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami is going to say to you the following: Tanoihi. Rabbi Ami is not going to take this sitting down. He says the Machlekes Tanoim. I have an opinion that has a basis in a brisa also. Don't think I'm just making it up as I go. And I say that you can only fast 13 times, and after that, I'm not interested in fasting, so therefore I say you can't matriach l'tzibur. No, there's a reason. I have a makar to say that you're not supposed to matriach l'tzibur yosemidai. What's the source of Rabbi Ami? Zot the Gemara. Amel Rabbi Ami Tanoi. It's a machlekes Tanoi. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa. We are not to be guys more than 13 taniyos on the tzibur. Because we're not to be matriach the tzibur too much. These are the words of Rabbi. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel who's there? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel responds and says, "No, this is not meaning this is not like the black letter law. No." And what's the reason that we don't fast more than the 13 taniyos? And we're not be matriach l'tzibur more than that is elo mipnei sheyetzes man shel reviyah, because already the time of the rain is finished. After the 13 fasts, it's already finished the time of the rain. So therefore, I'm not going to mandate additional fasts. And as we know, what happened? What did the Mishnah tell us on your base? Which we've said a few times here in Taanit so far. Yatsa Nisa v'yardu geshamim. What happens if Nisan comes along and that's when the rain comes? What did the Mishnah tell us? Siman klala. That's a siman klala. So we're not looking for rain to happen outside of the time. If this year was a drought, it was a drought. Fire fallen. It's over. In other words, you have what? 13 fasts for rain. And then the rainy season is finished. So I'm not looking to be adding in more fasts for rain at that stage. But the perennials that have nothing to do with the rain, so keep on fasting. Keep on fasting until you're done. So now it comes out that what? That according to Rabbi Ami says, I have a source. I have a source that says you're not supposed to matriach l'tzibur yosemidai. What's that source? You have an opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi says that when you have 13 fasts for the rain, ain't goes in yosim shlosh esrei taniyas al tzibur, because you don't decree more than 13 taniyas on the tzibur, because you're not one matriach l'tzibur yosemidai. Now, if you look at that line, is Rabbi talking about rain? If you look at this brisa, Tanya and goes Yosim Shoshes Tanya Sal Tzibur V'Shem Matrich and Tzibur Yosim Midai. It doesn't mention the rain once. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Aimer, he's the one who's saying, oh no. That's the reason about the 13 is because of the rain. Because Yotz is mana of the rain. But Rabbi's not saying anything about the rain. Rabbi says when your guys are Tanya on the Tzibur, you don't do more than 13 times. Why? Because we don't Matrich and Tzibur Yosim Midai. Does he mention rain? No. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is the one who's bringing in the rain. So for Rabbi is a source. Here's a mucker to say that you are not to be matriach tzibur yosemidai. That's the Gemara until here. So there's a few things to point out. Number one, when we say sheyotza zman shorvia, that there's no more time for the rain, right? Taisus says over here, if you look at Taisus, the second Taisus, Taisus says the zman revia the yera have it b'marcheshven, the yotza marcheshven, right? That the time from the Yair, remember there's two different the kinds of rain, right? There's the Yair rain, there's the Malkish rain, there's different kinds of rain. So these rains pass, and so when those rains pass, that what do you call that when those Marcheshim passed, so therefore we're not going to be geyser any more rains, geyser any more Taniyos because the time of rain has passed. Now I'm not really sure, to be frank, what Taisus means. So if you go back to the Mishnah on Yud, the Mishnah on Yud told us, Higia Yud Zayin Marcheshvan V'L Yordu Geshamim. Right? If Yud Zayin Marcheshvan passed and the rains didn't fall, so it's Chilu HaYechidim Misanin Gimel Ta'aniyos. Right? Then the Yechidim would start fasting 3 fasts. Oichlam V'Shoysim Mishekashecha, Mutar M'Mulach, V'Chitzim Sichon Yasa Sandam Tashemita, etc. Higia Rosh Chodesh Kislev V'L Yordu Geshamim. So Bezdin goes and Sholosh Taniyas Alat Tzibur. So once Marcheshvan passed, once you die Marcheshvan passed, the Yechidim would start fasting. Once Cheshvan was over, now it's Kislev and it still wasn't rain, then there would be geyser at Taanit. There would be geyser at Taanit. So the only time they started being geyser at Taanit was when? Was at what time? Was after Cheshvan already passed. That's when they started being geyser at Taanit. So I don't understand Taisus. Taisus is saying, what does it mean? What is Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer saying? The time for the rain has passed. So that's why we're not being geyser more than 13. So says Taisus, what is this man of the Revia? Says Taisus, this man of the Revia, the Yeira Haviv Marcheshvan, V'yatza Marcheshvan. I don't understand Taisus. We start the whole series of fasts only in Kislev. So what do you mean? It's only the Yechidim who are fasting in Marcheshvan, and they're starting from the 17th the Yechidim, and the first Gezerah has been the Kislev. And lest you think that this is only Taisus, Rashi also. Leimen Hashem was that. Look at Rashi. So Rashi says, "She'en zetam she'en manichem mishul tereach el shekvar yotzes manu shel v'yeshel yera sh'er Marcheshvan avar al kulan." Somewhere in Kislev, like the Mishnah said, what do you mean somewhere in Kislev? The Mishnah was very clear on Yud that we're starting the fast. And then he gave Rosh Chodesh Kislev, based in Gerz and Shalosh Taniyas Alat Tzibur. So I'm not really understanding what the Zman Shavir was. If I didn't have Rashi and Taisus, I would have said Pashut. What does it mean that the rainy season is finished? We passed Kislev, Shvat, it's over. There's nothing left to discuss. Now we're in Nisan, we're not going to be asking for rain anymore. So I have to think a little bit more about it. I just don't understand why they're talking about Marcheshvan. That's point number one. Point number two. This Gemara has an unbelievable accusation in it. Did you notice? Reb Ami is essentially being accused by Rav Abba of saying that there can't be more than 13 fasts for Shar Peranius because he didn't want to fast anymore. And the Gemara says, oh, but we found a marker for Reb Ami, a brisa, which quotes Rebbe, and Rebbe holds that you do not be geyser more than 13 fasts on the Tzibur because of the fact that it's bimatriach them yoyse midai. How could Reb Abba accuse Rabbi Ami of Ava Lagarmi Huda Ava, which Rashi is explaining means that he didn't want to fast anymore. That's why he said, that's a pretty loaded accusation. You're saying that he's mamish making it up as he goes. He didn't want it, so therefore you found a halachic solution for him. It's an unbelievable accusation because he didn't make it up, right? We're literally the Gemara showing a source for Abami, a source for Abami that is a shita of Rebbe. More than that, there is a Gemara in Brachas Memches with the Gemara. If you remember, we had it. The Gemara brought up something similar, very similar, but not exactly. Over there, the Maisa was about Shimon ben Shetach. Remember, after Yana killed out all the rabbis, right? This happened a few times. All the rabbis were killed, right? Herod killed all the rabbis. Basra Gimel, Yana the more in Kedushin, Ayin Beis. So times where the kings didn't get along with the rabbis. So Shimon Shetach was hidden. He ran away, Egypt, wherever he was hidden, he was hiding. His sister, right, who was the queen, Shlom Tzena Malka, so they bring him back. So the Gemara says that when Yana comes back, when Shimon Shetach comes back, so Yana says to him to bench. So Shimon Shetach says sarcastically, should I bench? All right, let me make a zimun, thanking Yanai for Yanai eating the food that Yanai has. Because Shimon Shetach wasn't invited to eat; he was invited to bench. So it's a bit of a sarcastic line. Then he says, "Okay, let's say Baruch Yanai she'achal mishaloi. He ate for himself, but I didn't eat." So the Gemara says that Yanai Hamelech says, "So like, what do you want?" So he basically gave him a cup of wine to drink, and then he drank another cup of wine, then he benched. And over there, the Gemara brings down that Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, says, Shimon ben Shetach avad dina lagarmei, the same lashon we have over here. He made his own things up. What do you mean he made his own things up? Because what's the halacha? When do we eat? I'm sorry, when do we make a zimun? When we eat. We don't make a zimun if we didn't eat, just to be making a zimun. You came into the place where they have people eating, and they're inviting you to make a zimun to lead it, but you didn't eat. If you didn't eat, you can't make the zimun. What if you drank? What if you drank some wine? You drank 2 cups of wine. Is that enough to make a zimun? Says Rabba, son of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, no, it's not enough. You have to eat. He didn't eat. Now, over there, that Gemara doesn't go to the defense of Shimon Shetach. We don't pass like Shimon Shetach. It's not enough just to drink. You have to eat something. The more, if you remember, we discussed then what is the nature of that eating, etc. But we're not getting into that now. But for our purposes, over there, you could explain of Shimon Shetach not in a negative way, because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is his brother-in-law who has a mercurial personality, who killed all the rabbis. Maybe he's messing with him a little bit, saying, "Well, should I bench? I mean, I didn't drink anything. I didn't have anything here. What do you want me to say? That you had a good meal?" So they give him a little bit to drink. They didn't give him anything to eat. So it could be Shimon Shetach is, he's on shaky ground. He doesn't necessarily have the confidence that if he goes too far with Yanai, that he won't do something again. Right? Even though he was promised that he would be safe if he came back, it's risky. But over here, literally have a price that goes Rabami. So how could Rabba say, the Avad Lagarmi who the Avad, that's a pretty potent accusation, when literally the Gemara is going to slug you up and show you that there was a source for Rabbi Ami. I have to leave that on the slide. I don't have an answer. Don't see anybody who discusses it either. Yeah, that's number one. Number two, did you notice over here that there's a machlokes in this brisa between Rebbe and Reb Shimon Gamliel? This brings up, right, the whole series in Yerdeh, Rishmem, about Kibbut Av. Right? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is the father of Rabbi. We know that a person is not allowed to disagree with his father, but that disagreement, you're also not supposed to machriya like your father, but that disagreement is only in relation to what? Only in relation to bifanav. You're not allowed to disagree with your parent, your father, in front of him. But in front of you're allowed to say, look, my father says this, and I disagree. That's not considered an issue. The Bir Agra there in Reish Mem brings down what's an example? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. That would be very nice over here. They have Machlokes, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. There's no problem. Of course, they can dispute. Now, you might say to me, okay, look, it's cute, but at the end of the day, this is a brisa. Rebbe didn't necessarily put this together. Fair enough. I don't have a proof that Rebbe put this together. That's true. However, I am bothered by one thing in this brisa, and that is that we know that when it comes, let's say, the Gemara in Erevin Yud Gimel, the Gemara tells us why is it that we pass like Basil over Beis Shammai was because of the fact that they were aluvin. They were very nice. They were nice. They had good personality. They were sweet. They were kind. But also they were makaben divrei Beis Shammai divrei. They brought the words of Beis Shammai to their own words. They first said who the opposition. They first said over what the Beis Shammai position was, and then they said over their position. They didn't say their position first and then put Beis Shammai regulate them to the end. No, they first said Beis Shammai, let everyone hear that, and then they disagreed. So as that covered. So whoever was, you want to say that there's no problem. Of course, Rabbi disagrees with Rabbi Shimon. They didn't. Rabbi's not the one who formulated the brisa. Fine. Whoever formulated the brisa, how did they put Rabbi's words first before Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Now you're going to say to me that they had to. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is clearly responding to Loimen Hashem who's there. He's responding to the fact that you can't say that the 13 fasts are a limit on any perennials. No, it's only by rain. So you would have to say that look, they couldn't really get that across this machlokes without doing it in this order. Otherwise, how would you start up? You wouldn't know what he's talking about. The whole phrase, the whole phrase is based upon the first opinion. Okay, but there could have been other ways potentially to write it. But nevertheless, what is clear to me is that there's no issue if somebody else is formulating a brisa. They don't have a chiyuv of kavod. They don't have to put Rebbe after Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. If Rebbe was one who's saying over his father's works and his own, then he would have to put his father first. But if somebody else was formulating, they don't have a din of kavod for them. They can put it in the way that makes the most sense to read. And the way it makes the most sense to read is Rebbe's opinion is that you don't be matriach tzibur yosem yishlosh taniyos. And if Shimon says that's only with regards to the rain, but everything else is no problem. Which I think is how you have to understand the order here. All right, now we get to an unbelievable little Gemara, which I've said until now we would do, and some we touched on it on Yud, we touched on it before, but now we will. I brought the tshuva. I remember to bring the tshuva with the rush down today, and so we'll do it in a little bit inside. Yeah, it says that the Gemara. Shol chulei b'nei Ninveh Rabbi. The people from Ninveh sent a letter to Rabbi. Right, Ninveh is in modern day Iraq, still there. And they asked a question. Going Anand, the Afil B'Tkuvas Thomas being a Mitra. What about us? We need the rain even in the summer. Hey Chanavid, how should we act? Kiyechidim, the minon oy kirabim. The minon. Do we act like the Yechidim, or do we act like are we compared to like individuals or comparable to like a rabbin? Meaning, do you view Nineveh, the city, right? And if you look in the pasuk there in the end of Yonah, Nineveh, Hi'ir Hagadolah, Mahalach Shloishes Yamim. Nineveh was a great city. Took 3 days to walk across Nineveh to the center, meaning 6 days across Nineveh, but it took 3 days to walk into the center of Nineveh. That's how long it is. I don't know how long does it take to walk across the whole Manhattan? A day? It doesn't take a day to walk across the whole Manhattan? Less than a day. So imagine Nineveh is a city, 3 days to walk into the middle of Nineveh. That's how massive a metropolis. We're talking a huge city. Now, I don't know how big it was in the days that they're writing. In other words, Nineveh in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash was a gargantuan city, right? The head of the Ashur is the capital, a huge empire. At this time, this is long after the second Mason was destroyed. Maybe it was a much smaller place. I don't know. At least you'll see the implications of this is going to be big. But whatever Nineveh was, they sent a letter to Rabbi and say, "What are we? We need rain in the summer." Now you're going to say to me, but didn't we say already about Bavel? Bavel is the place that sits on the water. They don't need the rain. Maybe Nineveh is more North Iraq, right? Bavel is South Iraq. Maybe there's differences. So we can't bring any rise. What we said about Bavel, that Bavel is the whole of Iraq. It's not Bavel. Maybe just the bottom part of Iraq. Could be Nineveh, more the northern part of Iraq. Maybe it was a different weather. I don't know. But again, going back to the Gemara, so the people from Nineveh said to Rebbe, that we need rain b'tkuvas Tammuz. Are we comparable to like the Yechidim or like a rabbin? In other words, if we're like Yechidim, then we say the brachas for rain. We're saying the same Talmud Mater, all of these things. We're saying in the Shemet Tefillah, we're asking for rain. Are we like a rabbin? And then we should say the same Talmud the bracha in the middle of Baruch Aleinu, like you would a rabbin during the winter months. So Shalach Luki, Yechidim the Miso. So Rebbe said in the back, he said, you are like Yechidim. You're not like a rabbin. And you should say by Shemiyat Tefillah. Fret Gemara Meis from Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda asked, Emasai, Bizman Shashanim Kitakinon, V'Yisrael Shurin Al Masan. So we have Bryce that says that Rabbi Huda says, when is it that we are going to say these kinds of things about rabbin? That's in a situation where the years are normal, where the Jews are living in their lands, meaning at some earlier time before the Golos, that's when we say this kind of a rule. But now, post the destruction, they say make there's post the Jews living all over the exile and all of that. Rashi doesn't want to have the last part of the Girsa, but what is it basically going on? It goes upon the years, the places. Doesn't go on the what's just in Eretz Yisrael. Now that everything's spread out, you go based upon your makom, what you need in your area. So what does that come out? Comes out now that it sounds like we have a machlekes. When Rebbe's saying that you do like a yachid, that the people of Nineveh. Here we have Rabbi Yehuda saying, when do we say that the people of Nineveh or wherever, people outside of Eretz Yisrael, would be considered like Yechidim? That's Bisman Shashonim Kitikunan, V'Yisrael Shulinan Masan, Aval Bisman Hazeh, when everything is all messed up, when the Jewish people are throughout the diaspora, you go based upon those areas, wherever they are. But you don't go based upon some idyllic Eretz Yisrael, no. Everybody else is a yachid. No, everybody is a rabbin, so long as they have a real makom. Says the Gemara conclude, you're asking a question on Rebbe, and now we have a lesson we have normally about Rav. You're asking a question on Rebbe from Rebbe Yehuda. Rebbe Tanahu Palig. Rebbe's also a Tana. Rebbe can fire with Rebbe Yehuda, he can disagree. So Rebbe Yehuda says that outside of Eretz Yisrael, they could be considered a rabbin, and they could say the prayers for the rain in Baruch Aleinu. And Rebbe disagrees. Rebbe says outside of Eretz Yisrael, they're considered a yachid, and they should be saying the prayers in Shemiyat Tefillah if they need the rain, and not in Baruch Aleinu. So how do we conclude this whole Maisa? Rav Nachman Rav Sheshes b'Shemiyat Tefillah. Rav Nachman says you say it in Baruch Aleinu. Rav Sheshes says you say it in Shemiyat Tefillah. And that's in fact the halacha that we do it in Shemiyat Tefillah. Now, as I said, we have to do this Shuvah of the Rush. So, we don't have a lot of time to do the whole thing inside, but I'll tell you outside. What's the Shuvah of the Rush? Just to give you a small taste of the Shuvah of the Rush. Before you see the Shuvah of the Rush, we should look in the Rush. So if you look in the Rush, you go, it's literally the first page of the Rush, on Daf Lamed Beis, second page, at least in my printing. So the Rush over here says, it's in Siman Daled. V'tema, right? V'tama anis. The Rush says, I'm really bothered. Lama anu noegin ki b'nei goyla b'ha. Why are we acting like the b'nei goyla? Why are we doing like they do in Bavel? And we start saying the same Talmud of bracha like the Mishnah told us on Yud, we start saying it right on December 4th. We went through a whole discussion December 4th, the different calendars, if you remember, Justinian, Georgian, all that stuff we discussed then. But the Russians bother. I don't understand why are we starting to say we say Talmud Levracha so late. So say we say Talmud Levracha like early. Say it earlier. He says, why are we waiting? He says, even though our Gemara is the Babylonian Talmud, this should be dependent on the areas that you live in. In Babel, some places they don't need water, some places they need water. Why are we waiting until 60 days after the Tkufa? Babel is a place that lives on water. They could say it later. We need it rain earlier. If we don't have rain until season Tkufa, the seeds will be lost. Why don't we do like the Mishnah, like they do in Eretz Yisrael, where they start asking for rain earlier? He says, I saw in Provence in the south part of France today. I saw that they used to start davening for the rain very early, right? In Marcheshvan, they started davening for the rain. They didn't wait till December 4th. And I said, it makes a lot of sense to me. That's the Rosh writing in the back of the Gemara. But here in the Tshuva is basically, I'll give you the context. The context is that the Rosh has two issues. One is that he doesn't want to start saying the same Talmud Levracha so late. He wants to make it back earlier and start at an earlier time because we need the rain. And two, he doesn't want to stop saying the same Talmud on Pesach. He wants to continue saying it because we need the rain. He says, I understand that there are different minhagim, but the minhagim should be dependent on the places. And now that we live in places that they need rain, let's do it in a way that is conforming with what we need. This was the rush. Two issues, both to be makdim the same Talmud Levracha and not to stop saying it by Pesach. I say it, start saying it earlier, and continue on saying it later. So he said, the opening part of the tshuva is something clearly being written by the Torah, that the Rosh tried to do it, and it didn't go. And then the Rosh writes it in his own words. First of all, he writes that in Ashkenaz, when he tried making these points, meaning, remember the Rosh had to run away after the Maram Rothenberg was kidnapped, so the Rosh had to run away. Then he got to Spain, but he clearly got there through going through south of France, right, and went over the Pyrenees from there. That's how he crossed. So, right, if you think about the map, Ashkenaz is much higher than Sfarad, right? So he went down from Ashkenaz, crossed it over from Provence all the way into Sfarad. So he says, while in Ashkenaz, while he was a young rabbi, he made his points that he thought about the same Talmud Levracha it should be changed. And they told him in Ashkenaz, it's just not a big deal. Why? Because we have a lot of rain here. We daven, we don't daven. This is a very rainy country. We don't need to change things. And look, at the end of the day, that was sufficient. He didn't make it such a big deal. But then he said, look, he got to Provence, and he saw that they do make them the same Talmud to the Baruch. They do make it earlier. This is in Klal Revi Simon in the Jewish Harash. So he's like, oh, I like this minhag. This is great. This is what I've been thinking my whole life. So they said to him, when do you finish? So they said, we finish by Pesach. They said, but why don't you do it later? Do you need the rain later? He says, yeah, actually, we do need the rain later, but we can't make that decision to make it the same Talmud Levracha after Pesach unless all the rabbis agree. So he got to move on. He goes to Sfarad. He doesn't change the minhag in Provence. Then he gets to Spain, and he tries over there to make a change. And we don't have a lot of time, so I will say this. The way he concludes, he says, he says, I saw the congregation refuse to accept my words, meaning they made a whole rash in the shul. when the Rosh tried to make the same time about the Bracha, the people went crazy. So Gamani Chazarti be militia v'lahaski v'zaknes shani mispalwa. So I also stopped to say the same time about the Bracha on the shul where I daven. Afal bisha isi yachal lisho. He says, I really do think that one is able to. Afal shani yachid. You're not a yachid. Keep tzarich rabmu. The whole place needs it. In Spain, they need it. Nevertheless, I didn't want to make different minhagim in different places. I see people don't want to do it, so I'm not doing it either. That's what he concludes. Practically, this is written in the 1300. When did this come up again as a practical matter? In the 1800s, right? This came up as a massive halachic question in the 1800s. People began moving to Australia, to Brazil, where the seasons are the opposite. South Africa, they need the rain at different seasons. Hey, you have machlekes with Nassim Adler, who's the chief rabbi in the United Kingdom. Do you do like the minhag HaMakom of where you are, like the Rosh says what you should be doing, or do you do like the Kol Olam Kulai, what the Jewish people do in general around the world? And there were different opinions. I think today most people just do the way they do everywhere, and they don't have a special place for Brazil, South Africa, and I think that's pretty much the accepted minhag. But it was not so simple. It certainly was not so obvious as to why that has to be the case. All right, we have to move on. There is a lot more to say, but we have no time. Yeah. So Zot Gemara. B'sheni matin im chashecho b'chamishi kol hayom nekvay Shabbos. So the Mishnah told us that on Monday you keep the stores open a little bit, and on Chamishi the whole day because it covered Shabbos. So the Gemara says, the Gemara asks a question. What does it mean that we say there's a difference between Monday and Thursday? Does it mean that on Monday you're matan and chashecha, that you sort of open the store a nook, like a cranny, you open it up just a little bit as it's getting dark, so you'll be able to get some food? And on Thursday it's opened up all day in order to give people the opportunity to buy food for Shabbos? Like Dilma B'Sheni Matin, or maybe we say no. Maybe what on Monday it is that we open the store all day, but only a little bit. But Chamishi place and Kalim Kulim, and the Thursday we open it up wide. We open up the store very wide so that people can go buy food for Shabbos. Says the more brings it right. Tashma the Taanit B'Sheni Matin Adar Erev. That on Monday you keep the store open, but only a bit, all the way until the evening. So in other words, you keep the store open on Monday, but not usually. You don't make it like it so broadly open that it should be so known. But just a little bit open, so people should be able to get if they need stuff, but not like you're open for business, because it's not normal. Times are not normal. But on Chamishi, person calling him Kulim like for Shabbos. But on Thursday, you're really fully open because the covered Shabbos people need to go by. They should know the stores are all open. What's the idea of matin that you keep it a little bit open but not so open? So if somebody, for example, had two doors. So keep one door open and one door closed, because that's going to let people know that it's not a normal time. It's open, but it's not really so open. It's the if you had some sort of a platform that was on top. So Keneged Pisklei that was opposite the door. You can open that, and that's not a problem. Fine. Let's do just a couple more dots. Says the Gemara. Over one of the second and the third series of fasts, right? They weren't answered. So you stop. You slow down on the working, binyan and you stop on the building and the planting. The Gemara says, "What are you talking about? Tana binyan shal simcha, netia shal simcha." We're talking about a binyan of simcha. What is this? Ezu binyan shal simcha. What is this house of happiness? Yeah, it doesn't just mean my house. Yeah, but what do they mean? What's a binyan shal simcha? Somebody's making a chuppah for his child. What's a happy garden? What is a happy planting? Says the Gemara, the royal garden. Rashi has a couple different shatim, but basically, it's not the hanging gardens of Babylon, but it is, something nice. Rashi says one of the shatim is the derech malachim. They make themselves a nice garden to be able to have shade and to go around. That's an atiyah shel simcha. You're not planting for food. You're planting for enjoyment. Like an English garden, right? They used to plant nicely, like the nobles, right? The upper classes in England was a big craze. So to have a nice garden was considered a place to relax, etc. That's the initial stuff. Stop here.